Bradley Stalder, Ryan Reynolds here with you, man versus machine. We are less than 24 hours from the NFL draft. Ryan Reynolds and I are going to bring you some more insights. We're reading the tea leaves. We've got some stances on these rookies as we're getting into it. Ryan, we'll start at the beginning. That's where, I think it's right to begin. We'll kick it off with Cam Ward. The Titans came out yesterday and said they have no intention of moving off of the number one pick. They've telegraphed for a while that Cam Ward is going to be the pick. It fills the need at quarterback. The Will Levis experiment over the last 2 years has merited them the number one pick overall. But with Cam Ward putting up mega production at Miami this year, the quarterback won for most consensus. There are some scouts, some people, some college evaluators who have other quarterbacks ahead of Ward. How confident are you in Cam Ward delivering on this 101 promise?
I like Ward. I tend to gravitate towards playmakers, play extenders. That's probably his best trait. He could definitely improve in the pocket, which that happens a lot with rookie quarterbacks that are play extenders over time. Like they're actually capable of doing that. Like Patrick Mahomes is a much better player in structure now than he was when he was coming out of college. Not to compare Ward to Mahomes, but I think my biggest concern with him is I wouldn't quite call him always accurate. The accuracy is not like a slam dunk for him, but I think his upside case is Deshaun Watson. I think his downside case is Jake Locker, to scare Titans fans a little bit. And the landing spot I think is average. The offensive line at least has a shot to be decent, and Calvin Ridley's a quality wide receiver one. So I like Ward. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he won the Rookie of the Year. I would take him if I were the Titans.
Yeah, and this was a discussion that I think we've had, in previous podcasts, but, Travis Hunter may be the unicorn of this draft. The question, of course, is always, do you take the best player available? Do you take need? Is Travis Hunter that much of a difference maker over Ward in terms of evaluation? I think that's something that the Titans have come to the conclusion that we would rather take the quarterback, our consensus one, at this spot. And if you hit right at the quarterback position, we know that brings that saves people's jobs. And so, Travis Hunter may not save people's jobs. And when we look at the 2 spot, Cleveland, they know they need a quarterback, but they also aren't in a position to be taking Cam Ward. That means that they would have to look at, another quarterback. Is it really that big of a difference? I think Travis Hunter, the answer is yes, in terms of talent. And Cleveland has some nice pieces. They've got Njoku, they've got Jeudy, they've got a good offensive line. Their defense is very good. Unfortunately, they were on the field way too much last year, so that wasn't able, the counting stats weren't in their favor. But with Travis Hunter as the wide receiver one and also bolstering that defense at corner, the reality is he made Shedeur Sanders look good. Even if you don't believe that Shedeur Sanders is that good, we'll talk more about Sanders here in a little bit, but Hunter made a Colorado quarterback a Heisman candidate. So any other takes on Travis Hunter is probably the number 2 pick in tomorrow's draft?
I have a lot to say about Hunter, actually. I'm going to lead in with 2 things. First, 2 years ago, I guess now, on the Mojo platform, I made like around 20 grand on Shedeur Sanders. So I was zeroed in every college football game of the 2023 season. And I think it was the 4th or 5th offensive play of the first Colorado game I watched. And I said to my buddy, I don't remember what number Hunter was, but I think it was number 1 or number 7. I was like, who's number 7? And it was Travis Hunter. He stood out to me immediately. I believe he was the top recruit in his high school class. He was ahead of Arch Manning. So, he's always been a premium athlete. Like you said, the unicorn player, the Shohei Ohtani player. I think he has top 5 corner in the league upside, top 10 wide receiver in the league upside. The thing that I really like about him is he plays big. He's 6 foot, but he plays more like he's 6'3", 6'4". And the second thing, and this is a Justin Jefferson trait, he kind of doesn't deaccelerate when he's breaking out of his cuts. He's very fluid. That's just a premium athlete. He's the kind of guy where in one player you get a Richard Sherman type zone corner. That's probably a better athlete, and like a T Higgins plus type wide receiver. I've never seen anything like it. The thing about the Browns is the Browns already have good perimeter corners. So I think this is the one team where I think most teams he's primarily a corner and then plays like 40% of the snaps on offense. I think with Cleveland, it might go the other way. Obviously I don't want the Browns to ruin Travis Hunter's career, but he is definitely, I love Carter. Carter's a great pass rusher, but I think you're crazy if you pass on Travis Hunter unless it's for quarterback.
Yeah, Travis Hunter, Cleveland could use that wide receiver one. Jeudy really stepped up last year in terms of being the guy. He was getting a 25% target share. He was winning down the field. It didn't matter if it was Jameis Winston or Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Jerry Jeudy's good, and the Browns used him in a way that unlocked what was previously locked in Denver, which was the downfield throws. But drafting Travis Hunter doesn't fill that need at quarterback. So the Browns are very much in a position to make a move, whether it be, into the teens, trade their second round pick to get back into the teens, or, there had been some rumblings over the last 2 days about the Browns answering or fielding calls for that number 2 pick. I do think they stick and pick with Hunter, but that second round pick, that early second round pick, they may be looking at seeing how the board falls for the first 15 picks or so. And if Dart and Sanders and others that they like are still available, they may look to trade up. But if, or maybe one of them goes off the board and they start to panic, they definitely need to trade up. But maybe they also look and say, this could be a situation where we can wait until day 2, early day 2. There may be a guy that we like. We'll talk about some more of the quarterbacks here in just a second. But the rumors have been heating up, Ryan, about the third offensive player going off the board. Ashton Jeanty is rumored to the Jacksonville Jaguars. There have been a lot of news blurbs dropping lately that Jacksonville is enamored with Jeanty, that they view him as, a dynamic player. Of course he is. He crushed in college last year by far. But if Jacksonville passes on him, the Raiders, the Jets, the Bears are all in play to be taking Jeanty. The Bears have been trying to move up to get Jeanty. That's what a lot of reports are saying today, that the Bears want Jeanty as the Jahmyr Gibbs type in the Ben Johnson offense. Okay, Ryan, like you're a betting man. How do you think this shakes out for Jeanty among Jacksonville, Vegas, the Jets, and Chicago, as Jeanty possibly landing in one of those spots?
I'll say this. I hope he goes to the Bears. I think it's just a very good fit with Ben Johnson. He helps Kaleb Williams. They're in a position roster-wise where they could take a running back since they fixed their offensive line in the offseason. Jacksonville seems like it's, like they're the sort of organization who does something like this. I think is, the chief thing. 2, like I kind of sort of get it a little bit because, you need to help Trevor Lawrence out. You need to give him something on offense, but that roster is not good enough to be taking a running back 5th overall. But again, I do think it's a smoke where there's smoke, there's fire thing. Over the last 15 years, the only running back prospects I personally liked more than this guy are Barkley and Adrian Peterson. So it's at least, if you're going to take a running back early, this is at least the guy. So, but yeah, I think it's going to end up being Jacksonville. I think the late smoke on it's there's a reason for it.
Yeah, there's the Jacksonville Jaguars have been reportedly enamored with at least taking an offensive player at this spot at 5 overall. I don't imagine that like Abdul Carter will be available at that spot. Like I think it's clearly going to be Ward, Hunter, and Carter at that spot. Maybe Carter falls to the Patriots, or maybe there's a trade up situation with the Giants for somebody to take Carter at that spot. I think Carter goes 3 regardless. But when we look at who could be taking Ashton Jeanty, Jacksonville is very much in play, even though, as you mentioned, it's probably not a good NFL build.
They're not ready for running backs for finishing pieces. They're not ready for it.
Yeah. We'll fast forward to Ty Warren, the top tight end in the draft. That seems to be the consensus right now. He is a top talent. Some scouts have him as a top 10, top 5 prospect in this entire draft. But the question is, of course, when we get to this spot, tight end positional value, right? How much of a needle move is a Ty Warren to a team? And he could fall to the mid-teens. This is within the range of outcomes. There's also the reality when we look at who could be taking a tight end in the mid-teens, like there are some bad landing spots that could really hurt a Ty Warren. Like if he goes to Arizona, that would be a terrible landing spot. They already have McBride. Atlanta has Kyle Pitts. They would have to trade. You laugh about these things, Ryan, but we see teams stay bad. They may.
That's why I find it's funny. If someone's going to do it, the Cardinals literally doubling down at the tight end position wouldn't blow my doors off.
I don't think that Dallas is going to take a tight end. I think they're okay with Ferguson at that spot. They also invested in Schoonmaker in the second round a couple years ago. So I don't think that, he's in play there. The Colts would be a tough landing spot. It would be opportunity galore, but the pie is so small. So I'm concerned that if there's not a trade up, that Ty Warren could be in a little bit of a trouble, given that he's projected to be in the mid-teens. He would either have to be drafted much higher or much lower, and I don't see that happening unless there's a trade up. Now, there's been media speculation about Ty Warren trade up tied to the LA Rams, especially with Brock Bowers getting. There was information floated that last year the Rams were trying to trade up to get Brock Bowers before the Raiders selected him ultimately. The Rams moved off of Cooper Kupp. The slot is very open. Tyler Higbee is an aged tight end coming off of an ACL tear that caused him to miss most of the 2024 season. It could make sense that the Rams again try to attack the tight end position through the draft. How are you approaching Ty Warren, and is that evaluation correct that it may require a trade up from a team in the 20s to go get a guy like Warren and for him to be fantasy viable?
Yeah, I like the Rams talk because what I was going to come with, Warren, is the best case scenario for everyone, both for fantasy purposes and for pure football purposes, is if he ends up with the Chargers somehow, because he's a more well-rounded tight end. He's a very good blocker. He fits in a more balanced, run-centric offense. I think that's like the perfect marriage where they get a premium player to help Justin Herbert, and he fits in with what they want to do. The Rams would be fascinating too. Like, they have. Like you said, they have slot reps open with Kupp where he can be shifted out into that role. You have Stafford, you have McVay. That's fascinating. Like the talk of him maybe going as high as to the Jets at 7 is a little alarming. The Colts, as you said, like it's a good football fit, but for fantasy, like you said, the slice of the share of the pie is not big enough to feed Ty Warren for that. So the Rams are in a fascinating spot too, because they're either taking a secondary player or they can go do this because they're close. They have the pass rush, they have the offensive infrastructure. I'm rooting for that now, Brad. I hope the Rams come and get Ty Warren.
Let's go Ty Warren to the Rams. Hopefully those rumors hold true. We'll find out later tomorrow. The wide receiver, the pure wide receiver one, of course, Travis Hunter, wide receiver, cornerback, expected to go number 2. But Ted McMillan is also getting mocked in the 12 to about 18 range. I've seen him go even as high as 6 in some of the mocks to the Raiders. So the Raiders, the Cowboys, Todd McShay just came out today and was trying to throw cold water on Tet, saying that he gave up plays over the middle of the field. Yeah. It's a bizarre note that someone like this would be like, it's either that a team is leaking this or McShay. I don't know. I don't see a motivation as to talk down a particular player unless, there maybe it was an old quote or something. I don't see a motivation for trying to talk somebody down like Tet McMillan when he's getting mocked as high as 6. So yeah, we mocked McMillan last week. If you were watching Man versus Machine, he went to the Dallas Cowboys, and I think that was an interesting spot. We discussed that at length. Are the Raiders in play at 6 for McMillan? Or are there any other fits that you think would be tantalizing for fantasy? My about pick 16.
Yeah, I think the Raiders make sense. Give yourself another option for Geno Smith as they're kind of in this weird stance where they're trying to win now, obviously, with the acquisition of Smith, which in fairness, after their quarterback room last year, like going and getting Smith is fair. But I guess preparing for, building a roster for a young quarterback to come in the next few years, like I'm cool with that. I think a realistic landing spot that I want is Carolina. Like you mocked a defensive player of the Panthers, and from a football standpoint, that's what they need to fix that defense. But Bryce Young, he had an encouraging second half last year, but I don't think we're still like, we're not extending him yet, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think you give him a weapon, Tet McMillan, Drake London body type that, is a better player over the middle, let's say. So I'm kind of pulling for him to go to Carolina.
Carolina would be interesting. It would also be, he could learn under Adam Thielen. The Carolina Panthers are only tied to Thielen for one more season. Jalen Coker was a nice pick. It also insulates them if Xavier Legette does not pan out. We're still unsure whether Legette will pan out. So that may be just another weapon to develop Bryce Young. That would be interesting. I like the Carolina pick. The second tight end off the board is Loveland, Colston Loveland out of Michigan. He's been mocked to Dallas. He's been mocked to Seattle, Atlanta. If Kyle Pitts is traded, I don't see him falling too far. Like it's Ty Warren usually mocked ahead of Colston Loveland, but yeah, he's one of the top talents. And one of the issues that we ran into again was, we discussed this earlier, positional needle moving. Does Colston Loveland really move the needle for a team right away? And especially a team that's in the middle, like almost made the playoffs. Is that going to be the difference maker? I wonder if he just gets pushed down because of the tight end position.
Yeah, I mean, he's a good player. I'd comp him to Greg Olsen. He's the tight end one in most classes, but more of a modern tight end, better fit in spread offenses. So, like, I think he'd be an odd fit for the Colts, for instance, since they're linked with Warren. But obviously, like, I think the Bengals would be fascinating. On the other hand, just similar to Carolina, they shouldn't be taking anything other than a defensive player unless they kind of have to. So, I think that's the best realistic landing spot. Denver could be sort of interesting. The Chargers would still be interesting. And, I think the most interesting narrative there is if he somehow falls to the Chiefs and becomes the heir apparent to Travis Kelce. I think that would be the most interesting scenario.
That would be all the way pants off for Dynasty.
Yeah.
Looking at where mock drafts have had Colston Loveland most often mocked to the Chargers and then the Colts and then the Rams. So it seems like, we are hitting on that position that teams are identified, those three, to a tight end. Maybe it's not Ty Warren, maybe it's Loveland, but one of those teams is going to come away with a tight end is what is being mocked here. Good deal. The second running back off of most boards, Ryan, is Omarion Hampton. And Denver is, a real popular pick at 20. It kind of aligns with where much of this mocking is happening. Hampton out of North Carolina, crushed the last 2 years, over 1,500 yards each of the last two seasons. He is most often getting mocked to Denver, but also to Chicago and to Washington as well. Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, the Houston Texans also kind of makes sense. You had mocked last week, you had mocked Hampton to the Baltimore Ravens, which was suboptimal from an analytics perspective. We all remember that. That became a viral clip for people. But give us your take on Omarion and Hampton. What do you think is the range of outcomes for tomorrow? Does he make it to day 2, or is he a lock for round 1?
I think he could definitely make it to day 2 personally. I mean, he has great size. He's a capable blocker, which means he can stay on the field for a long, for 3 downs potentially. When I evaluate players, I usually put them into buckets comparison-wise, and DeMarco Murray is a popular one for me for running backs, like a good player, fluid. That doesn't strike me as special exactly. To mention another North Carolina back, I think Hampton's better than Javonte Williams, but I don't exactly see, superstar written all over him, where if Denver takes him, that's fine. They have the offensive line and the young quarterback and the infrastructure to, try to upgrade at that position. But if he went in the top between 30 and 40, I think that would make sense for me. And, the big thing for me is for a big guy, and again, I only watched 2 or 3 games. I didn't watch every snap that he took, but I didn't really think he's a bit like Barkley in this sense. Like, Barkley's a great big guy, but he doesn't run with power all the time. I didn't like, there's another guy we'll talk about later that I actually think is more of a bruiser than Hampton. So I think he's a good player, but I wouldn't spend a first round pick on him personally.
Well, we'll find out tomorrow whether Hampton gets that coveted first round draft capital. Before we move on to a few other players that we expect to go off in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, we have a word from Matt Kelly about Fast Draft Origins.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite player profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
It's not a $25 deposit match. Use the promo code STACK for $50 deposit match. That's right, $50 on Origins. There's Origins Chaos that just dropped yesterday, actually a couple days ago. And look, it's like 60% filled. It's fast. It's moving. It's crazy. It's so much so that there's talk here at the Player Profiler House here in Tampa that we might have a Chaos 2 that's dropped during the draft. It's going to be some wild stuff. So there's been a real big pickup. You want to get in the Fast Draft streets and use the promo code STACK for 100% deposit match up to $50. Now, Ryan, perhaps one of the most controversial players as we are preparing for the NFL draft is Shedeur Sanders. He is oftentimes mocked at 7 to the Jets, at 9 to New Orleans. Some have had him fall all the way to 21 for Pittsburgh. Some have said that he should fall out of the first round. This is a difficult situation to nuance because it seems like there are different voices coming from different places. You don't know what they're motivated by, whether it is actually a player evaluation, whether it is jealousy of the Sanders family, whether it is that they're concerned about landing spot, or they only watch one part of Sanders' film. Some NFL draft evaluators have Sanders as the quarterback 1 in this class and have held firm on this up until today. So how are you reading Shedeur Sanders, and how should we as fantasy managers be approaching Sanders as we are preparing for the draft tomorrow?
Like I mentioned before, I've made a pretty good chunk of chains off Sanders, so I'll always have a soft spot for him. He's a good distributor. Like you mentioned before with Hunter, he had really good pass catchers in Colorado. He did not have a great offensive line, and one of the big knocks on him is he took too many sacks. But especially with pocket passers, which is what I'd frame Sanders as. He's a traditional pocket passer that can extend in a little bit. But when you don't have stable pocket protection, when you don't have a stable pocket, you don't have stable offensive line play, it starts to affect people. Like I remember Jared Goff's rookie season. He was an entirely different player his rookie year under Jeff Fisher than he was with Sean McVay. So I'm not overly concerned with that. My concern would be is I think the absolute ceiling is he has a Dak Prescott type career, which is, that's good. Dak Prescott's going to end up being at least a borderline Hall of Famer. I think the floor case is Andy Dalton with a big ego, so that's actually a pretty good range. I don't, as a Giants enthusiast, I don't want them spending the third overall pick on him, but if they came back in and traded for him and got him at pick 20 or so, I'd be totally fine with it.
Yeah, Sanders is it's hard to discern whether it was Travis Hunter, whether it was the pass catchers, whether it was that Sanders was able to make all of those reads. This is like, my fear is that he will be Justin Fields, that essentially like he had these good pass catchers in college that they were able to make up for mistakes. And that if he is drafted to a suboptimal climate, like how Fields was drafted to the Bears, they were not prepared to coach up a Justin Fields, a player who relied very heavily on the Ohio State wide receivers to win downfield and made him look very good. That if he doesn't have that supporting cast and doesn't have the coaching, then the floor could be even worse than Andy Dalton. Ultimately, like we could be looking at Will Levis.
Oof. That's not very nice, Brad. That's not very nice. The other thing too is if he gets Justin Fields, he doesn't have even close to the speed that Fields does. So he's in trouble. He is in that scenario.
Let's say though that the Browns come back and reunite Sanders with Travis Hunter. I think that's actually one of the better scenarios, because not only is there that connection, but also I think you'll agree with me, Ryan, that Kevin Stefanski knows what he's doing. Like when it comes to coaching, he's been dealt in a terrible hand with Deshaun Watson's performance over the last couple of years and the injuries and all of that. But Stefanski's won coach of the year before with the Browns. The Browns have a good defense. There's not a lot of pressure. It may be very interesting for Sanders to sit behind Joe Flacco for even a season and get practice reps. So we'll see what type of draft capital Sanders gets, because if it is, let's say, top 10, top 5 draft capital, then he's going to be a starter right away. They're not going to sit him on the bench. But if he is sneaking into the end of the first round, like if he's pick 30, 31, 32, it's much more likely that it's a Flacco Pickett scenario and that Sanders is going to sit for a bit.
Yeah, it's a good spot. I don't think he'd be very happy he doesn't seem like a Cleveland kind of guy, but like you said, Stefanski's won coach of the year twice. The offensive line it's kind of like the Texans. They had like a bizarre bad year last year, but some of it can be chalked up to injuries. There's at least hope that stabilizes, and Hunter and Jeanty have complementary skill sets, so it could definitely be worse. I think that's a pretty good landing spot if that happens.
Well, we'll keep moving with talking about Matthew Golden. He has been connected to Dallas and to Baltimore and to Detroit and Miami. Even you and I were talking about the possibility of, if Tyreek Hill gets moved, Matthew Golden might be a pick for the Miami Dolphins given his speed. Is there a good fit for Matthew Golden where he could be a top 24 wide receiver in year one? Oh, that face is probably a no.
Yeah. I think his best fit is probably with Dallas. I think the combination of him and CeeDee Lamb would be great for all parties involved. I think Tampa's potentially interesting. I actually think Denver's a little interesting. I don't think he's going to finish as a top 25 receiver in Denver, but I think, and the Chargers would be probably the best spot. So Dallas, yes. Chargers, yes. Everywhere else, I'm going to lean towards no. Yeah. Well,
hopefully, Dallas has got to get somebody, right?
Unfortunately, Dallas needs many things.
They need lots of things. They need
Lots of things.
Emeka Egbuka, speaking of first-round projected wide receivers, is getting mocked to the Chargers. You mentioned the Chargers for a few of these wide receivers. Houston, the CJ Stroud connection, that's real. That is also a pick 25. He may or may not be available there. But if Houston gets the feeling that he might not be available, they might move up for him. CJ Stroud has in the past advocated to go get his guy. We saw that with Tank Dell, and Dell is going to be out for the majority of the 2025 season. Wide receiver is a sneakily large need for Houston at this spot. Yes, they need offensive line help, no doubt about that. But with Diggs gone, Tank Dell hurt, and Nico Collins, he dealt with injuries last year. Egbuka might be a nice fit to complement Nico Collins in Houston.
Yeah, I think Houston's probably the best case scenario. If the only one that I think could challenge it and they'd have to trade up would be Buffalo. I think Buffalo would be the one where I'd be the most stoked about because he could walk right in there and be the top option there. And truth be told, I never thought Stephon Diggs was a top 5 receiver. I just thought he was very lucky that he got to play with Josh Allen. More of a top 15 type guy to me. Egbuka he'd have a shot to walk right in there and put up some pretty big rookie of the year type numbers in Buffalo.
We'll keep removing Egbuka, Chargers, Houston. It works out. Next is a quarterback that we'll discuss, Jaxson Dart. Now, this is one that is kind of wild, Ryan. There's been lots of mocks that we've seen a wide range of where Jaxson Dart could go. Some people have some evaluators have Jaxson Dart as the quarterback 2 in the class, the quarterback 3 in the class, the quarterback 5 in the class. And he's mocked in the back end of the first round. He's mocked in the second round. In a mock draft I did today, I autoed, but I set certain settings, and Dart ended up being a round 3 mock selection. And if he gets round 3, that's danger territory. You want to see Jaxson Dart get round 1, but I don't know if he has the talent to be round 1. And even if he does, is he going to be producing year 1? I'm not convinced of that either.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I've comped him to Christian Ponder with more zip. I get, especially if you're a highlight watcher, I get why people like him because he does make some high difficulty throws. He does have a good arm. He does look fluid at times. Consistency is the big concern for me. He's a guy where if he had a Derek Carr type career, I think that's pretty good for him. And, while if you're a team like Pittsburgh, you'd probably sign up for that in a heartbeat right now. I definitely wouldn't be overpaying for that kind of player though. So he's my quarterback 3. I could see him going around pick 35 to 50, I think would make sense. Also wouldn't stun me if he ended up in the 3rd round because that's probably how I'd be viewing him if I was building teams for the NFL.
Yeah, right now his 50th percentile mock is at 33 overall. Mostly between 20 and 35. 43% of mock drafts have him going to Pittsburgh, 16% to New Orleans, and 13% to the Giants. So, Steelers, and that kind of fits with where the Steelers are picking at 21. There have been reports that the Steelers are not interested in Shedeur Sanders if he ends up being available at 21. But also, is Jaxson Dart can he pick at 2.0?
Yeah, that's almost why I'd be kind of surprised that Pittsburgh went down this road because you're kind of signing up for the same thing where that's almost like the median outcome,
right. We'll keep moving with Luther Burden. Right now, Burden is like a 1-2 turn mock type of player out of Missouri. Last year, 61 receptions, 81 targets, 6 touchdowns. His draft stock for mocks have been falling. As of late, he's been mocked, even just a couple months ago, he was going at 21 as 50th percentile. Now it's, 25, 23, but it continues to drop, a precipitous drop. So does that drop continue? Does he fall to round 2, Ryan? Is that a concern that you have, that he doesn't get the day 1 draft capital that he was projected to get months ago?
Yeah, I could see him falling to the early second round. I mean, to shut out Matt Waldman here, he has my favorite style of player comps, where he basically gives you a spectrum where it's this player, an X, which is the player you're talking about, and then the ceiling. Most of Burton's game is similar to Randall Cobb to me. But every once in a while, he'll make a contested catch or, like a back shoulder fade that's a little bit like Garrett Wilson. I don't think like comping him to Garrett Wilson's appropriate, because Garrett Wilson's like a top 10 player at the position. I don't think that's going to happen here. But the thing that makes him interesting is every once in a while, he'll have like a stop-start move that's like, reminiscent of like an elite punt returner, like a Percy Harvin or a, Dante Hall type guy. So that part of it makes him interesting. But I think something that analytics will probably find in the next couple of years in like a really like thorough way is, I think the most replaceable production in a passing attack is slot play. And I think I could see slot players starting to get devalued a little bit because of that. So again, good player. He'd be a good fit for the Bears in the second round if he made it that far.
Yeah, that would be interesting. The Bears have moved off of Keenan Allen, it seems. There is an opening in the slot, DJ Moore and Rome Odunze on the outside. So there is slot wide receiver snaps to be had. And a second round pick, you could see if the Bears miss out on Jeanty, that they go get an offensive weapon in round 2 instead. Let's keep her moving. Mason Taylor, tight end out of LSU, is getting round 2 draft capital. This is a player that 6'5", 255, early declare. He's not even 21 years old yet. But I have concerns that he might not be that good. Like looking at his production profile here, at what he did at LSU over the last 3 seasons, he's had 6 total touchdowns over the course of 38 games played. His PFF grade, his highest PFF grade was 67.8. His receiving grade wasn't even 70. And like 1.23 yards per route run is very low. He was playing some inline, some slot. I'm just not convinced that he's good or like would be worthy of a second round selection. But if he gets a good landing spot, it's possible that if he vaults Warren or he vaults Loveland, this is a landing spot dependent type of selection. So Mason Taylor, a player that I'm skeptical until I see the landing spot, and he may not even get the landing spot.
No, I like this. This makes a lot of sense, especially from like a productivity standpoint, because, and what I was going to say about him is he's like a guy who does the little things well. He's a good all around player. Like he has good feel. Like he sits in zones at the right times and stuff like that. The line that you use, like, I don't know if he warrants a second round pick, I think is the perfect way to frame it. I think if you're the Chargers and you don't get Ty Warren, all those teams we talked about that would make sense for Ty Warren. I think if you're a contending team, then Mason Taylor's around in the second round. I think it makes sense in those scenarios. But like, again, even the Colts, if the Colts if they pass on Ty Warren, it's like, why are you going to take Mason Taylor in the second round? Like where is he going to provide the difference making upside that roster needs? So for a few teams, the Chargers are the one top of mind. Like if the Rams are linked to a tight end, it makes sense there too. But again, I think there's a big drop off. He's more of a good player than a fantasy difference maker for sure.
Yeah. PFF puts him as shades of Charlie Kohler, which is also not what you want to see for a second round pick.
Yeah, that's
If you're wondering who Charlie Kohler is, that's the point. Okay.
Yeah.
No shade to Charlie Kohler, but Mason Taylor should not be where he is getting mocked.
That's fair.
We'll keep moving. Running back TreVeyon Henderson has been mocked as high as 21 to Pittsburgh. He got a virtual visit with Kansas City yesterday, and look, this would be best case scenario. Like this would, if he goes to the Chiefs, this is not CEH 2.0. This is TVH. Okay, TreVeyon Henderson, and he will crush, absolutely crush with the Chiefs. It would be nuts off, pants off, all like nuts landing spot. It would be the most out. Yes, he would be 101, I think, within the 101 discussion of rookie dynasty drafts. Whether you want Travis Hunter there, Ashton, Jeanty, Henderson, I think it would be a big three instead of clearly those two above him. But even if he goes to Pittsburgh, if Cleveland trades up for him, because Cleveland needs a running back, there's definite need for Cleveland in lots of different spots. Henderson, there's so many opportunities at the back end of the first round, beginning of the second round, that there's no excuse. He probably gets a good landing spot.
I'm going to say this straight up. I like him more than Hampton. I think again, I'm going to watch more of these guys after they get drafted, because where they fit will change my perspective on them. But I think he's smaller than him, but he plays more physical than him. I think he's faster than him. My comp is Aaron Jones, so you saying Kansas City is like that was makes perfect sense in the world to me. To turn the clock way back when Andy Reid was in Philly, Brian Westbrook just had monster seasons, and Kareem Hunt had monster seasons too. Where if this guy went to Kansas City, those wheel routes, and oh man, I hope he goes to the Chiefs. Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook type, James Cook, not Dalvin Cook, James Cook type player. I like him a lot.
Love it. And his teammate Quinshan Judkins is getting mocked in day 2. Most of the mocks are getting him in round 2. One of the teams tied to Judkins would be the Green Bay Packers. They may be looking at a Josh Jacobs successor. I think he's a 1-to-1 fill-in for year 1, and the Packers really do want to. I think they wanted Marshawn Lloyd to pan out, and he did not. Now maybe they pass on Judkins and they put in chips in again for Lloyd because it was just a health issue. It's not like he didn't perform, but Denver has been linked to Judkins, especially in round 2 if they pass on Hampton or Henderson, and the Detroit Lions in round 2. David Montgomery is getting up there in age. They're probably not going to sign him to another contract. Quinshan Judkins, and we've seen Monty and Gibbs both suffer injuries. The amount that the Lions run the ball, they probably want another successor there. Judkins, I like him long term. He may be looking at sharing a backfield in year 1. There's a lot of good landing spots, but we may have to wait a bit.
Yeah, I just refreshed on these guys before we came on the air. Reminds me a bit of Nick Chubb and Stoney Michel in Georgia, where you're sitting there like, how the hell are these two guys in the same college backfield?
Right.
There's so many teams, like how did they get both of these guys? I'm with you. Like, I think he's a second-round pick. I think he's rock solid. The truth is the Denver call is a good one. Hampton is a bit similar to Mark Ingram, so I could see Peyton overpaying for him because of that, but Judkins is a pretty good consolation prize if Denver passes on Hampton and doesn't end up getting him. So I think that's a good spot, and that's probably the spot where if he's going to see the lion's share of the work anywhere, it could be in Denver.
Love it. Love it. Ooh, breaking news. George Pickens has unfollowed the Steelers on Instagram. So Diva's going to diva. Jayden Higgins is being mocked in round 2. Maybe the Jets. He's been connected to the Jets, and the Jets need another wide receiver. I was doing my, I do projections, Ryan. We've talked about my projections before, and part of the projections is determining like what gaps still exist for teams. And when it comes to the amount of available targets and available receptions, it's the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns are at the top 1-2 for what need still needs to be filled. Like I have 164 open receptions under projection right now for active New York Jets players. So they could hammer wide receiver in rounds 2, round 3. Maybe they look at Tet McMillan if he's available there. There's a lot of space next alongside Garrett Wilson, and Jayden Higgins fits an outside wide receiver, mold. So Higgins there might be a pick. What are your thoughts on the Jets and then maybe Higgins as a fit?
Yeah, the Jets in general, like they're in a position where they don't need a whole lot. They could use a little bit more offensive line help, a long-term quarterback, and then you're talking, like you said, a wide receiver to complement Wilson. I think Higgins is interesting. He's a good athlete for his size, not a great route runner, but I could see him being he could make sense as a Mike Evans understudy type player. So, be a skill fit for the Giants. It'd be a skill fit for the Jets too. So I like him. I don't know if he's going to be ultra productive, but I think from a football standpoint, he brings a skill set that an offense needs. So I find him intriguing.
The mocks have Jayden Higgins most often drafted by the Patriots, and then the Packers, and then the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah. The Patriots could be interesting. I just don't think he's a headliner. Like I wish they had a headliner and he fell into this 2 slot. But out of that cluster, I hope he lands in New England.
Another wide receiver mocked in round 2, Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. He's gotten better every year. This is a player who will turn 23 during the season. We look at where he's been trending as of late. He's been mocked pretty, consistently at the 2-3 turn. It seems like he made a big jump at about the combine, but again, is it Noel? Is it Higgins? Because the Patriots are most connected to Noel as well, and the Packers are connected to him. The Houston Texans are connected to him. Does Buffalo need another shot after the Keon Coleman failed? Does Houston need a wide receiver? Like that seems to be in round 2, round 3, where anyone could be picking Noel.
Houston's interesting because that's a spot where he could walk right in and challenge for significant playing time, bring value. New England would be interesting too. Again, we talked about this slot production. I think is the most replaceable, but he's a Khalil Shakir type player who can, he can bring some margin for a team.
Yeah, Noel is 5'11", 200, and he played about 75% of his snaps in the slot last year for Iowa State. Arroyo, the tight end Elijah Arroyo, is being mocked in round 3. And a big question going into the draft season is his knee right? Because he's big, 6'4", 245, redshirt junior. He's 22. I look at last year, though, and only marginally better than Mason Taylor in terms of overall grading, overall receiving grading. He had a lot of touchdowns. He had 7 touchdowns in 13 games for Miami. So, when you're playing with Cam Ward and Ward is putting up the stats that he does, of course, you're going to see, guys benefit from that. But he won big down the field, almost 17 yards per reception. That's very nice. And if a team is looking for, I don't know, a Kyle Pitts light or even just a Kyle Pitts production, maybe it's Elijah Arroyo.
We've done a lot of analysis over the last year on this show. That might be my favorite thing that you've done at this point because I don't even have to say anything. Pretty much, plucked it right out of my head. I'm very much on the same page all across the board. Again, he has Darren Waller type upside because he's, a receiver with speed and, the downfield option, but he's scary. So again, he goes to the Chargers, he goes to the Rams. That's fascinating, but he's definitely a boom bust guy.
He's most often mocked to go to the Chargers, then the Chiefs, and then the Jaguars.
Sense.
Kaleb Johnson, running back, seems like he's been left for dead in some mocks. Is he going to make it to round 2? He's mocked at the end of round 2 very often, could get early round 3. And who's drafting at early round 3? Cleveland. If Cleveland says, we are looking at getting Travis Hunter at the beginning, we trade up in our round 2 to get the quarterback. We still need running back. Who is the running back for Cleveland? We don't know. It could very well be Kaleb Johnson available at the beginning of the 3rd round and then just fire him off because the opportunity is there for Johnson.
He's a bruiser too. Like my note for him was, I think he could give the Steelers most of Najee Harris. Like they're kind of similar skill set wise. But yeah, Cleveland would be a good spot. I'd be pretty pumped about that actually.
Yeah, that would be 86.5 PFF grade last year, 86.7 rushing grade. He caught pass. He had 22 receptions last year, 21 total touchdowns, 240 rush attempts. This was a player who really, like, Iowa's offense was oftentimes a joke, Ryan, before last year. Now Kaleb Johnson puts it on his back and everyone's doubting it. So, maybe he can also carry the load if a team like the Browns say, you know what, Kaleb Johnson, you're welcome to Cleveland.
Yeah, no, he's a physical grinder, but I like him. He's a football guy's guy.
We are almost done, Ryan. If you like the analysis, make sure you guys are subscribed here at the channel. Player Profiler Now Plus. Make sure you're following Ryan on X at Ryan Reynolds NFL. Make sure you're following me at FF Stalder on X. And Tre Harris is a darling in many circles, a big guy, winner at Ole Miss. I remember he was asked at the combine, how are you going to differentiate your career from like that of a Jonathan Mingo? Mingo was taking shots at the getting shade at the combine. Poor Tre Harris, he was just like, well, I'm going to be consistent. I'm going to be a winner, sort of thing. Like, you love to see it. AJ Brown mold, instead. But he's mocked in round 2. We've talked about Tre Harris as being, again, one of those big-bodied wide receivers. There is need for that type of player. We could see it in Seattle. Seattle is a boatload of slot receivers, but who's going to play on the outside? Does Arizona look for a complement opposite Marvin Harrison Jr.? Does it allow Marvin Harrison to run more sophisticated routes if Harris is the one just going deep? Do the Chargers look at somebody to complement Ladd McConkey? I think it depends on if they do anything in round 1 with wide receiver. Harris, this could be a very interesting landing spot dependent player who has massive upside.
Yeah, I like him again. Like if he went to Dallas, I'd be pretty excited about that. Arizona's interesting. That makes immediate sense to me too. The Chargers, I still just want them to get a lid lifter for Justin Herbert, but I'd be pretty good with that too. Even like Kansas City long term, I think that would be sneaky interesting. Buffalo, I think he's a good player. Allen Robinson type player, like you said, he's a contested catch type player. He's not like he's not a burner really, but real good football player. He's one of those guys where he's at least borderline one of my guys where I could see him exceeding expectations early.
Ooh, we've got just 4 more players, Ryan. We've been motoring. This has been great. Dylan Sampson, running back out of Tennessee, 5'11", 201, not even 21 years old. He declared early. This is what we want to see. But we've also seen these young running backs like just get benched, get buried. Could he sit during year 1 like a Trey Benson or a Blake Corum? Because he's getting mocked early round 3. Maybe he goes to the Giants and sits behind Tyrone Tracy for a year, or maybe he works his way into the rotation later on. That may be best case scenario for both Tracy and Sampson. How are you approaching Sampson in your drafts?
Yeah, I think in most drafts, there's only like 2 or 3 rookie running backs that make a major impact most years. This one's probably going to be a little different because so many of them are going to go in the first two rounds. But I like the idea of Sampson here, where he sits behind someone for a year and then maybe emerges. Any kind of crowded backfield that doesn't have a headliner, like Washington would be interesting. The Giants would be a really good spot. Dallas would be a good spot. I'm with you on that. I kind of like him.
Quarterback Tyler Shough is getting mocked into round 4 on some drafts. But reportedly teams are high on Shough. Do you believe that the smoke that he is a round 1 pick, that some teams have him as the quarterback 1 in the class, and that they're willing to take him the back end of the first round? He's giving Davis Mills vibes, right? Or like Brandon Whedon vibes. Like, am I wrong about that?
No, I can see why people like him a little bit because he's made some plays where like, where'd that come from? But overall, my comp for him is Blake Bortles. That's not a compliment. Like, he's a good athlete. Every once in a while, he'll pull a sizable rabbit out of his hat, but most of the time it's inconsistency. The idea of taking him in the first round that sounds like something that's probably going to get people fired. So 4th round, sure. Early, I wouldn't put my job on the line for that.
No. But as we remind our viewers and listeners, bad teams stay bad, Ryan, and that's because they make some bad decisions. So my bold take, Jason Allwine is going to put out a video tomorrow morning, and my bold take is that some team is going to draft Tyler Shough as the quarterback 2 in this class, and that is a mistake, but that's what they're going to do. So
just don't let it be the Giants. Even the Jets. Like, I live in Jersey. I don't want to have to consult people in my personal life over that for the next 4 years.
All right, we're gonna finish strong in the quarterback realm. Jalen Milroe, he's getting mocked in early round 3. He probably needs early day 1 draft capital just for the intrigue, but also given his development as a passer, he needs to sit on a good team. Like, we saw Jalen Hurts sit for Carson Wentz for a while. We saw Lamar Jackson sit for a while. He was not the starter right off the gate. He needs to sit on a good, hopefully gets drafted by a good team who can develop quarterbacks. Jordan Love as not a 1-to-1 skill set comp, but as a development comp comes to mind for Jalen Milroe. Like, if you want to see success, you need to see him sit for a while and not get rushed out there, or else he gets ruined like Trey Lance and Justin Fields. So I think draft capital, landing spot are really necessary for Milroe to be successful.
For sure. I mean, he has a lot of similar skill sets to Justin Fields. I think I said this last week. He takes more layups, though. Like, he's more willing to check down. A lot of these guys who are premium runners are essentially premium read, then either check down or run. Fields is more of I just run if I have to get to my second read. Milroe is willing to check it down, so I kind of like that. Again, it wouldn't be like good for Milroe in terms of like playing time, but if Baltimore took Milroe and sat him behind Lamar Jackson, he's the kind of guy where in that situation, he could probably keep them afloat if Jackson missed a month. So yeah. I kind of want to do that. In terms of which team should take him, I guess like if the Colts drafted him in the 2nd round and developed him for 2 years, it's just, but again, like you're looking at the same thing you have with Anthony Richardson essentially. So I'm not sure they should do that. But again, like you said, he's a project. He at least has a shot to be a factor at some point.
Maybe round 2 Seattle.
Yeah. I like that.
Last player, Ryan, Cam Skattebo. He's getting mocked in round 2, but there's a wide range of opinions about Skattebo. Could he get a nuts landing spot, or is Skattebo the next Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
That's a great comp. That's actually like a perfect comp because he's a really good player. He just doesn't have a lot of juice. I don't think that's my one and only concern. If he was a little bit faster, I actually think he could be really good, but I don't think that speed's going to translate to the NFL. So that's actually like a perfect comp. Like, he probably is going to be the next Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Well, Ryan, hit us with one surprise. What is a surprise that you think will happen for day 1 or day 2 as we close out this podcast?
I don't know if it's going to happen, but I think Henderson should go ahead of Hampton. I think Hampton should be, a 2nd round back, and I think Henderson should go before him. So that's probably my strongest stance in that regard.
I love it. Give us the Henderson love, and it would splash some cold water on the Omarion Hampton truthers out there. So we'll see what happens. We're so excited. Tomorrow is kind of like the Christmas for fantasy football. We get to unwrap at least the first day of Christmas. We get to unwrap these the rookies. Gives us new information, not just the coach speak, not just teams lie all the time, but they can't lie with their actions. They tell the truth with how they are drafting, which players they select, and where they do. And we get to find out that information tomorrow. So make sure you're tuning into Player Profilers YouTube page. We're going to have draft coverage starting just before 8 o'clock tomorrow Eastern, so 8 p.m. Eastern on the Player Profiler channel, 7 p.m. Eastern on Friday, and then on Saturday we'll get you kicked off a little bit before noon for rounds 4, 5, 6, and 7. On behalf of Ryan Reynolds, I'm Bradley Stalder. Until next time, good luck in the fantasy football streets, everybody.